right, well, let's talk a little bit about the trade war. China is continuing to stress that a trade deal will not be reached unless the U.S. removes all tariffs on Chinese goods. Our very own Rick Newman is here to break it all down. What's the latest, Rick?
This is kind of what we already know. They've been saying this all along, but they're reiterating that just because the two presidents had a cheerful meeting a couple of weeks ago, that doesn't mean we're all in the clear here. The markets keep talking as if this is only up to President Trump. Will President Trump make a trade deal? That's the big question. There are two sides here, and it's just as important what the Chinese perspective is and whether they are willing to make a trade deal. I think markets are too optimistic about a deal between the United States and China because Trump has signaled he wants real reforms out of China, not a cosmetic deal. China has signaled we're not giving you real reforms. And that 10% left that Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin talked about, that's the hardest 10%. They negotiated all the easy stuff. That's the 90%. The 10% that's left is the hard stuff. So I'm pretty skeptical about the prospects for a trade deal anytime soon.
You know, it's interesting when you look at the market reaction last week on the back of the G20 meeting. There's a bit of a relief rally, right? But you did point out then that, look, we don't even know what the specifics were in that discussion. Now we hear China say that if they don't roll back the tariffs, we can't move forward, essentially, which seems to put us back to where we were before the G20 meeting.
I think that's exactly where we were, except there's one problem, which is that Trump has since added more tariffs. So those new tariffs that went into place, they went up from 10% to 25% at the beginning of May. It's like we went back in time after the G20, but with higher tariffs now in place. So we're at a more restrictive level of trade as these two sides are saying they're going to get together and keep negotiating. You said we don't know what the details of that meeting were. There may have been no details whatsoever. I mean, that's my guess is there were no details.
They
just said, let's find a way to say we're going to keep talking. They each sort of made a minor concession, and now they're supposedly talking. But they're talking about the same things they couldn't agree about before.
So what then do you think is going to be that kickstart, right, that actually moves the needle somewhat forward? Because it seems when it comes to these trade deals, we keep repeating a lot of the same questions. We keep repeating a lot of the same things. So what actually do you think is going to be the thing that actually moves this just a little bit further down?
I actually don't know. And that's one of the reasons I'm skeptical that we are going to get some kind of deal. And when we see a strong jobs report like we had today, I think that actually inoculates Trump against concerns that his trade deal, his trade protections and the tariffs are causing damage to the U.S. economy. I think that actually emboldens him. And that could be a danger because, we see one good month of numbers, but that doesn't mean we're going to see another good month of numbers. You guys talked just a moment ago, there had been weakness in manufacturing leading up to this report. Now it looks like, there was some hiring in manufacturing, nothing to worry about there. There could still be plenty to worry about there that's going to surface in coming months. It just hasn't worked its way into the data yet.
We've had a lot of guests that have come on who look at the U.S.-China trade fight and say, look, there's got to be a resolution because there's an election on the horizon, 2020. And I keep wondering if President Trump continues to escalate it, what's the off-ramp at this point? I mean, if it is really a political game and he needs some kind of resolution to take to the voters, where does it end?
Again, that assumes that it's all up to President Trump and that China and President Xi don't have a say in this. And I think that is not the case. I mean, it's clearly not the case at all. And I actually think you can make the opposite argument, which is that as the U.S. election gets closer, that time actually works against President Trump and it works in the favor of the Chinese. Because
we have no election.
Because the Chinese know that President Trump made the campaign promise that he was going to get a trade deal with China. And as he gets closer to November 2020, the pressure mounts on him to be able to demonstrate, yes, I did get a deal. Here's the deal. And think about how negotiations work. So that's gives China leverage to say, we know you need to get this deal. So here, we actually want this, this, and this.
And that means we're going to be continuing to talk about this, right? For another 6 months. Rick loves this. All right. Thanks for that, Rick.